For years, Diana's jewels were more than heirlooms. They were sacred symbols of grief, memory, and rebellion. But what happens when Queen Camilla, standing in the very shadow of Diana's ghost, dares to ask for them back? It wasn't a polite request, it was a royal ultimatum. And what Catherine did next sent shockwaves through every corridor of Buckingham Palace. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Diana's jewelry was never just about gold, diamonds, or royal vaults. Each piece carried the weight of a woman who reshaped the monarchy through vulnerability, defiance, and sacrifice. The sapphire ring, the emeralds, the earrings worn during moments of quiet sorrow, they became emotional landmarks for the public and deeply personal relics for her sons. When William inherited these pieces, it wasn't framed as wealth passed down, but as memory preserved. To him, they were fragments of a mother taken too soon, protected not by protocol, but by promise. But within palace walls, those same jewels told a different story. To Camilla, they represented an unfinished chapter 1 that never stopped casting a long shadow over her role, her acceptance, and her legitimacy. As Catherine's popularity surged, as comparisons between her and Diana grew louder, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Every public appearance Catherine made wearing Diana's jewelry wasn't just admired, it was felt. It reminded the world who Diana was, and by extension who Camilla could never be. Privately, this tension simmered into strategy. Conversations between Charles and Camilla grew heavier, more deliberate. The language was careful, wrapped in tradition and precedent, but the intention was clear. There was talk of consolidation, of restoring certain pieces to the crown, of redefining what belonged to the reigning queen versus what remained personal inheritance. On paper, it sounded orderly. In reality, it reopened wounds that had never healed. Then came the moment no one outside the palace was meant to know about. A discreet request, delivered not in person but through Camilla's private secretary, framed as a formality rather than a demand. Certain items, it suggested, should be returned. Not borrowed, not shared, returned. The implication was unmistakable. Diana's jewelry once again was being claimed, this time by the woman history had already placed in opposition to her. Catherine's response didn't arrive in anger. There were no raised voices, no visible confrontation. Instead, there was stillness, a calm so deliberate it unsettled everyone involved. She listened, she acknowledged, and then she refused. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but firmly, with the quiet authority of someone who understood exactly what was at stake. These pieces, she made clear, were not royal assets to be redistributed. They were William's, they were Diana's, and they were not up for negotiation. That refusal rippled instantly through the palace ecosystem. Staff whispered. Advisors recalculated. Because this wasn't just about jewelry anymore, it was about power, memory, and who had the right to define Diana's legacy. Catherine's stance drew a line that couldn't be unseen, placing her not as a passive figure within the monarchy, but as a guardian of something sacred, something untouchable. But what Camilla expected to be a quiet, behind-the-curtain retrieval turned into a defiant storm, one that neither Charles nor the crown could contain. Behind closed doors, Camilla's tone was never raised, but her meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't just about diamonds. This was about dominance. And as her demands escalated, so too did the quiet war between two women who refused to be outshone. Camilla had spent years maneuvering through a monarchy shaped by ghosts. She had endured cold stares, backhanded praise, and an unrelenting public memory of a woman she could never replace. But now, crowned and titled, she believed the time had come to assert her position not just through presence, but through possession. And at the heart of her strategy was one undeniable truth. In the monarchy, jewelry isn't accessory, it's authority. Her belief was simple: every royal jewel, including those tied to Diana, now belonged to the reigning queen. To her, she began quietly as she always did, not with direct confrontation but through counsel. Courtiers were summoned, precedents reviewed, whispers spread through the palace halls that Queen Mary's old protocols allowed for a reigning queen to assume control over significant heirlooms for state representation. Camilla didn't frame it as revenge. She framed it as restoration, a matter of image, of unity. But beneath the polished surface was something sharper, a deep, growing resentment. Catherine's elegance, draped in Diana's gems, had begun to eclipse her authority. The courtiers were split. Some feared igniting a media firestorm. Others, more aligned with Camilla, saw it as a chance to reassert structure. But the moment that changed everything came when Camilla sent a warning not to Catherine, but to William. Quietly, behind the scenes, he was told that if the pieces were not returned voluntarily, public questions might be raised. Tensions might unintentionally spill into the press. The Crown's ability to control narrative, Camilla implied, had its limits. It was a chilling threat cloaked in diplomacy. Charles, meanwhile, was caught in an emotional vice. On one hand, his loyalty to Camilla had reshaped the monarchy. On the other, the very mention of Diana's name still brought an unmistakable shift in his expression. He understood what those jewels meant to William. He knew the silence they carried, but he also understood the storm building behind Camilla's eyes, and he said nothing. But Catherine did, not through words, not through confrontation. She simply wore the ring. Diana's sapphire, bold and defiant, gleamed under the cameras at a state luncheon just days after the demand. She didn't flinch, she didn't look away. Her presence sent a message clearer than any royal decree. This wasn't about jewelry, it was about legacy. And she wasn't surrendering it. And just when Camilla thought William would mediate, his silence said everything and his next move. He made the battle deeply personal. For William, this wasn't protocol. This was sacred. Camilla had invaded the one thing he never thought he'd have to defend, his mother's memory. And when pushed to the edge, he didn't just resist, he retaliated. The pressure had been building behind his measured silence. William, always the diplomat, had spent years holding his grief with grace, placing duty above personal anguish. But when Camilla's demands crept into the realm of Diana's legacy, something within him shifted. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. This wasn't about denying a queen her jewels, it was about protecting the last remaining fragments of a woman the monarchy never fully understood. Every sapphire, every pearl, was wrapped in moments William had locked deep inside. And now, someone was trying to take them. Behind closed doors, Charles tried to intervene. What began as a quiet conversation in a private room quickly spiraled into something more raw. William didn't shout, he didn't accuse, but his voice cracked in a way his father hadn't heard in years. He spoke not as the Prince of Wales, but as a son still carrying the weight of an unfinished goodbye. Charles, caught between past and present, offered no clear resolution, only the echo of conflict between loyalty and guilt. Nothing was settled, and everything was changed. That very evening, William made a decision that startled even Catherine. He retrieved one of Diana's lesser-known pieces, a delicate brooch Diana had worn on Why once, and quietly placed it in a small box marked for Charlotte. It wasn't for now, it was for later, a symbolic gesture, a message, sealed in legacy, that this lineage would not be rewritten by force. From that moment forward, the direction was clear. Diana's memory wouldn't be erased. It would be enshrined in the next generation. And then came the public statements William never made, but that Catherine did, without saying a word. She began to wear Diana's earrings again, not just at private gatherings, but at globally watched events. Each appearance felt deliberate, not flashy, not overdone, but unmistakably charged. The media took notice. Analysts began framing the jewelry as more than tribute. It was seen as a line of succession, a quiet declaration of power. And palace insiders, those who watched the family closer than anyone, whispered that William was doing more than honoring his mother. He was arming his wife with memory. Camilla saw it, and she felt it. Every photograph of Catherine gleaming with Diana's jewels, every headline drawing comparisons she thought had long faded, deepened her isolation. The Queen was being upstaged not by rebellion, but by reverence. She wasn't fighting Catherine, she was fighting a ghost, and it was a battle she was losing piece by piece. But nothing could prepare Camilla for what Catherine would do next, because her silent refusal wasn't just personal, it was strategic. She never raised her voice, she never made a public statement. But Catherine's message was crystal clear: she would not surrender Diana's legacy. Every brooch, every sapphire, every whispered glance on a royal balcony, was part of her war without words. The pressure was unspoken, but its weight was undeniable. In the aftermath of Camilla's demands and William's quiet defiance, the battleground shifted to something far more visible public image, and Catherine, with calm precision, began to send signals that bypassed palace corridors and landed directly in the court of public opinion. Each time she stepped into the spotlight, the choice of jewelry was not incidental. It was deliberate, calculated, and it spoke volumes. Diana's sapphire earrings at a military ceremony, her aquamarine bracelet during a state visit. Every appearance layered meaning on top of memory, and the world watched in stunned admiration. The media noticed first. Headlines began to mirror the growing fascination. Catherine channels Diana, the people's princess lives on, royal elegance reborn. Photographs of Catherine were routinely placed side by side, with images of Diana not as a comparison, but as a continuation. The public began to see her not just as William's wife or the future queen consort, but as the rightful heir to Diana's compassion, her dignity, and most crucially, her influence. The narrative shifted. It wasn't just Catherine wearing Diana's jewelry. It was Diana speaking through her. Within the palace, the effect was seismic. At a royal reception meant to project unity, the tension was palpable. Camilla, known for her ability to navigate even the most awkward dynamics, avoided eye contact with Catherine entirely. Staff whispered about the sharp contrast between the two women, one whose presence drew glances of sympathy, and the other whose silence commanded loyalty. The room was full, but the divide had never been wider. What once simmered privately had now bled into official engagements. It wasn't just the royals who felt the shift. Staff usually bound by protocol and neutrality began to show quiet allegiance. Some still clung to Camilla's circle out of duty, but many, especially the younger aides and those who had once served Diana herself, found their loyalty gravitating toward Catherine. She didn't ask for it. She didn't need to. The symbolism did the work. Every brooch pinned above her heart was a statement that Diana had not been erased, she had been enshrined. Then came the moment that turned silent defiance into undeniable strategy. At a prestigious royal gala honouring Commonwealth heritage, Catherine arrived last, dressed with intention. Around her neck rested one of the most contentious pieces in the royal vault, Diana's emerald choker, the very piece Camilla had privately requested weeks earlier. The statement was thunderous, not angry, not disrespectful, but immovable. Catherine hadn't just refused Camilla's claim, she had reclaimed something deeper: authority, legacy, truth. Camilla, watching from across the room, didn't need an explanation. She felt it in every camera flash and every whispered compliment. The optics were no longer in her favor. The war for Diana's jewels had moved out of the shadows, and Catherine, with poise and precision, had taken control without ever saying a word. But as the optics turned against Camilla, she decided to act not behind the scenes, but in front of the world. And her timing was no coincidence. No one expected her to wear that necklace. And when Camilla stepped into Westminster Abbey draped in a historic emerald that once belonged to Diana, the air turned colder. This wasn't just a coronation, it was a declaration of war. The moment was orchestrated with regal precision, yet it carried the sting of a deeply personal betrayal. The emerald choker, long rumored to be one of Diana's most private pre-divorce pieces, had not been seen in decades. Its sudden reappearance around Camilla's neck on the most televised day of her life was not lost on anyone. This was no coincidence. It was a message, subtle to the uninformed, searing to those who understood the history woven into every carat. The decision shattered whatever fragile truce still lingered behind palace walls. The reaction was immediate and fierce. Some royal watchers gasped in awe, seeing it as a revival of regal splendor, but others, more attuned to the undertones, recoiled. Online forums, newspaper editorials, and global commentators questioned whether this was a deliberate provocation, one designed to reframe a contested legacy and stamp it with Camilla's authority. The symbolism was too sharp, too specific, and the outrage it ignited revealed just how deep Diana's memory still cut. Inside the abbey, the atmosphere shifted. Catherine remained composed, her face the very portrait of discipline. But in the brief moments when the cameras swept across the royal line, viewers noticed something else, her fingers intertwined with William's, her grip tense. It was one of the few visible cracks in the armor. In that single movement, she betrayed what words could not. This had gone too far. The body language between Catherine and Camilla became a study of subtext. Analysts pored over footage, dissecting glances, posture, micro-expressions. Every avoidance, every hesitation was magnified. The nation saw two women locked in a silent confrontation, both wearing Diana's legacy, one by inheritance, the other by assertion. And the public, watching in real time, began to choose sides. The palace, sensing the storm, scrambled. Hours after the coronation, the Queen's press office issued a vague but pointed statement, claiming the emerald had no confirmed ownership and was recovered from a broader royal collection. But the damage was done. The clarification only deepened suspicion, confirming what many feared, that Camilla's choice had not only been deliberate but defiant. She had worn Diana's necklace not to honor the past, but to reshape it, to possess it, yet beneath the spectacle, something far more dangerous stirred. The necklace was not the only relic from Diana's past to resurface that week. Behind locked doors, in a vault that had been untouched for years, lay a sealed envelope. And inside, a document that had been long forgotten, until now. But the fallout from that emerald would unearth something far more dangerous than symbolism. A secret document that changed everything. Buried in a sealed envelope, locked away for decades, was a handwritten note from Diana herself. And when it resurfaced, marked for William, upon conflict it blew open the gates of inheritance, guilt, and a mother's final wish. The discovery did not come with ceremony. It arrived quietly, almost reluctantly, uncovered during a routine review of Diana's private correspondence letters, long believed to be fully catalogued. But this one had been misfiled, tucked behind documents no one had revisited in years. Its existence alone felt intentional, as if Diana had anticipated the moment her legacy would be challenged. The handwriting was unmistakable, the tone intimate, and the timing devastatingly precise. Inside the envelope was not a legal document in the traditional sense, but something far more powerful, a perso. Null addendum written in Diana's own hand. She did not speak in statutes or clauses. She spoke as a mother. She wrote that her jewelry, the pieces bound to her identity and her suffering, were never meant to return to the crown. They were meant to pass to the women who would stand beside her sons. Women who would protect the memory she feared would be rewritten once she was gone. It was not about ownership, it was about guardianship. The palace went into quiet overdrive. Legal experts were summoned, their assessments cautious and divided. Some argued the note held no binding authority. Others warned that ignoring it could ignite a public reckoning no institution could survive. The ambiguity was dangerous, the emotion behind it explosive. For William, the letter was not a tool, it was confirmation. Proof that his mother had seen this moment coming. And in private meetings, he didn't argue legality. He spoke of intention, of trust, of promises made in the dark and kept in silence. The effect was immediate. Insiders began to shift their language. Catherine was no longer described as merely wearing Diana's jewelry. She was now referred to as its custodian, the chosen one. The woman Diana had implicitly entrusted to carry her presence forward when voices tried to erase it. This reframing sent shockwaves through the palace hierarchy. It elevated Catherine beyond optics and into legacy, placing her at the center of a narrative Camilla could not control. Camilla's reaction was visceral. The idea that Diana, even in death, could still dictate terms felt like a personal affront. Worse still was the realization that the battle was no longer between two living women. She was being eclipsed by someone who wasn't even alive. A woman whose influence refused to fade. Every whisper of the letter felt like another door closing, another reminder that the crown could not overwrite memory with authority. The letter didn't settle the conflict. It sharpened it. It didn't offer peace. It drew lines that could not be crossed without consequence, and as word of its existence spread among a select few, alliances began to shift in ways no legal ruling ever could. Because this wasn't about who was right. It was about who Diana had trusted. But what came next wasn't legal, it was personal. And it would change the power dynamic inside the palace walls forever. She's only a child. But Princess Charlotte is now at the heart of a royal tug-of-war. And when William secretly earmarked Diana's most treasured heirloom for his daughter, it wasn't just a gift, it was a prophecy. It began with a decision made in silence. William, still reeling from Camilla's bold move at the coronation and the discovery of Diana's sealed letter, took action that no one saw coming. Without consultation, without ceremony, he instructed the royal vaults to set aside one piece, Diana's wedding tiara. The same Spencer tiara that once crowned a young bride walking into both her destiny and her destruction. He marked it not for the crown, not for Catherine, but for Charlotte. It was a message disguised as legacy. Diana's memory would not pass through institutions, it would pass through blood. When word of the decision leaked among the innermost circles, the reaction was instant and bitter. Camilla was said to be blindsided, convinced that such an act undermined the very structure of monarchy. In her view, heirlooms didn't belong to individuals, they belonged to the sovereign. And to have such a significant piece taken out of circulation and tied directly to a child, one not even in the direct line of succession, was an unmistakable rebuke. Not just of her position, but of her future influence. But William didn't waver, and Catherine, in her quiet way, reinforced the symbolism. Days after the tiara's reservation, she was seen taking Charlotte on a private trip, one the press barely caught wind of. The destination? Diana's childhood home. No press statements, no photo ops, just a mother and daughter stepping into history. It was more than a visit, it was a ritual. A moment designed to bind Charlotte not just to royal blood, but to a legacy shaped by pain, defiance, and quiet resilience. Within palace walls, whispers began to swell. Staff referred to Charlotte with a reverence that had never been used before. Some even murmured that she was being groomed not for a title, but for a throne of perception. The future queen in waiting narrative, once reserved for myth and fantasy, now echoed in real conversations. Charlotte wasn't just William's daughter. She was Diana's granddaughter. And in her, many saw not just continuity but restoration. For Camilla, the threat was existential. She had clawed her way into the monarchy, survived scandal, and outlasted scrutiny. But now, she was watching her influence erode not through rebellion, but through legacy. Every move William and Catherine made seemed to strip her of symbolic power. Every piece of jewelry placed on Charlotte's future path felt like a nail sealing Diana's permanence and Camilla's exclusion. She tried briefly to reassert control, requested new rules for inheritance protocol, pushed for adjustments in the royal jewelry charter, but none of it landed. Her attempts began to look desperate, reactive, almost petty, because no matter how many crowns she wore, Camilla couldn't shake the reality Charlotte's presence wasn't political. It was spiritual, and the people could feel it. And in the middle of it all, caught between duty, grief, and defiance, stood Charles. What he did next shocked even those closest to him. He'd remained neutral for too long. But when the palace tension threatened to unravel everything, King Charles made a private decision that left the monarchy reeling and his marriage with Camilla hanging by a thread. Charles had watched the war unfold in silence. For months he stood in the center of a palace divided, hoping diplomacy would spare him from choosing sides. But neutrality had its cost. Every time he refused to intervene, the distance between him and William grew colder. Every time he ignored Camilla's frustrations, they curdled into quiet resentment. And now, as the jewelry battles turned into legacy wars, the crown itself began to feel unsteady beneath his feet. He realized something had to give, and it would have to be him. In an unannounced meeting behind locked doors, Charles summoned William and Catherine. There were no aides, no advisors, just the three of them, and the weight of decades between them. He began not with commands, but with confession. He admitted for the first time that he had mishandled Diana's legacy, that the crown's effort to sanitize her memory had only given it more power, that trying to suppress her story had in fact preserved it. and that in watching Catherine carry Diana's image with such quiet strength, he could no longer pretend that the past could be buried by protocol. Then came the moment that shifted the balance. Charles told Camilla privately that he would no longer support her pursuit of Diana's jewels. He didn't frame it as a betrayal, but she took it as one. He explained that the conflict had reached a point where tradition could no longer justify pain, that William and Catherine were not defying the monarchy, they were defending it from its own ghosts, and that, moving forward, Diana's pieces would remain with Catherine, to protect, to wear, and eventually to pass on as she saw fit. The consequences were immediate. Camilla, wounded by what she saw as abandonment, began pulling back from public engagements. Her once dominant presence in royal affairs began to dim, not by order, but by choice. Whispers spread that the Queen was unwell, but those closest to her knew the truth: her influence had been quietly revoked. And in her place, a new narrative began to emerge. One shaped by William's resolve, Catherine's grace, and Diana's lingering shadow, but the final blow came in the form of a whispered farewell. As the meeting ended, Charles turned to his son, looked him in the eye, and uttered the words that closed a decades-long wound. "Let your mother's light continue. I was wrong to try to dim it. It wasn't an apology. It was an abdication not of title, but of denial." And in that moment, the battle over Diana's memory seemed at last to find its conclusion. But even as the royal winds calmed, one question remained: what will happen when Charlotte comes of age and the battle for Diana's legacy reignites once more? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.